Well, good afternoon to everybody, and welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so happy to see all of you here today at the Lunch and Learn. It's just exciting to see such large number of people to show up here at the Fitchburg Center to listen to two amazing young men up here. What I'd like to do is take a minute, and let you know I'm Janice Hughes. I am one of the commissioners here in Fitchburg. And I'd like to introduce you to Jill McCone. Where are you, Jill? The director of the Fitchburg Senior Center. And then to one of my colleagues, Commissioner Vance Ashby. Is she here? Vance? All right, okay. And then I'd also like to take a minute to, first of all, thank the Fitchburg Senior Center staff. They've done a great job. And a special thanks to Mandy, Chris, and the volunteers ensuring that you're all set up and your meals are ready to go. So I appreciate that. Today, we've got an opportunity and we're honored to have two very pillars of our community to come here to speak with us and share their stories with us. It's amazing. They are both, authors and have done some wonderful things, but not only are they authors, they've come with a plethora of experience and information that we all should learn and listen to today. Dr. Carl Grant, professor at the University of Wisconsin, has been one of the longest standing black professors at the university, over 50 years. Think about that. He has certainly experienced a lot and has a lot that we could learn from. Dr. Harris, son of one of the first black families that migrated or that settled in Madison, Wisconsin, building the black community and sustaining the black community. Amazing, amazing. So we have two powerful people here today. But I really think that it's going to be so important for us to take time and really, really listen to these two gentlemen. So therefore, I have changed the format a little bit. Normally, we have a speaker and then we go right in, and we have questions and answers during the process. Today, I'm going to ask you to allow each of these speakers to speak, tell their stories, and you hold your questions until the very end. At that point, we'll open it up. We'll have a forum for questions and answers, and Jill will be out on the floor with a microphone. Wave her down. If you've got a question, she'll get to you, and then the floor is all yours. I just also want to say, I think it's really exciting to continually see familiar faces that come to the Lunch and Learns often, and I certainly appreciate that support. But I also like to say I'm seeing a lot of new faces here today. I know that we have not only just past speakers, and that's Betty Banks and Pia James with us today, but we also have Mount Zion MTZ group that's here as well, and a lot of other familiar, new faces. So I truly appreciate you all being here, and I want to let you know that we certainly welcome you here, not just today, but again and again and again. Come out and visit us. A lot of programs, a lot of Lunch and Learns. And again, our doors are open and welcome for you all to come. So with that, I would like us to invite Dr. Carl Grant to tell his story.
Okay, big hand now. I don't deal with a small hand. Now, I hear this is about Lunch and Learn, so I know you're really here for the lunch. And I believe in speaking truth. You're here for the lunch. Now, I'm going to call her Janice. That's when she writes me as Mrs. Hughes and all of this formal stuff, and I'm very informal, especially at lunch. And she gave me explicit directions. She wanted me to come and talk about writing a book, and she must have sent me 6 or 7 emails. Even how to get into this building, what to do, and on her emails, she would always say, let me know that you received this email. Now, I work with people all over this crazy world, and I don't usually get emails like this. But for Janice, I said, okay, I called Dina. Dina's my good buddy right there. I said, who is this woman? And she said, Carl, she's fine, just go along. All right? Now, I also want to give a shout out, Dina, move your purse, to my alley stand-up. Now, this is what the future's all about and what writing books and everything, now you can sit down, Allie, is all about. Now, are you folks serious about writing? Or are you just here for the lunch? Are you really serious about the writing? All right. Well, I'm going to talk just a minute about the writing. And what I would encourage you to do. So the next 15 minutes is kind of about writing. There's no formula. There's no recipe. I have written over 50 books. All right, since I've been up here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And at first, when somebody said, Carl, you ought to write. Now, this was back in the early 70s. I looked at them and said, no. Now, I can stand up and tell a story. I don't have a problem in doing that. But they said, put it on paper. I said, no. And in part because in school, I was taught not how to write. That writing is in part your voice, your ideas, your expression, your experience. It is leaving behind you a trail for people to follow. It is your ideas. And part of what you have to do is to sit down and do it. Now, let me offer you a suggestion. If you're serious, I want you to write a letter to someone you care for. And if it's a young person, that's even better. Someone who just gets on the phone with you and say hello, and then they're off the phone. But to write somewhat with a purpose in mind. To tell them about you in a way that you want them to understand you. And you have many stories to tell. I brought, because Janice told me, bring some of your books along. So I just reached on my shelf and I grabbed the first 8. But I did bring the last 4 that I've written. And I have one in which I wrote about Obama. All right, and that was a few years ago. But each book, how many of you heard of Raisin in the Sun? All right, this is my last book. So I'm going to choose a book. Why don't you choose a book for me? My good buddy over here. He's looking at me. And then I'm going to tell a story about how I got into that book.
I like this one, James Baldwin.
Okay, let me do James Baldwin first. You familiar with James Baldwin? James Baldwin is everlasting. He's all over the news often. And we constantly refer to him as a great essayist. A person who wrote really in the 60s and the 70s. He died in 1987, but until his death, he had nothing but wisdom that stays with us. James Baldwin, here's how he came about. See, 20 minutes is really not enough for me to tell these stories. All right, let me go back to James Baldwin, and I'm going to try to do it. I see I'm going to only be able to get to two. Years ago, and this had to be in 60s or 70s, living in Chicago. There was a show on, how many of you, anyone here from Chicago? There was a show on back then called the Herb Custerman Show that came on at 12 o'clock at night. And one night I had been from the north side to the south side on a Saturday night, but nothing was going on. So when nothing is going on out in the street, you come home, get an early sleep. But when I came home, I was bored, I got some food, and I said, let me see what's going on the Cup Show. They call him KUP. And I went and got the sandwich, came to settle down, turned on the show, and he had about 5 or 6 guests on the show. Politicians, people from New York, celebrities, political leaders, etc. And I'm sitting there drinking a Coke probably, because I don't drink, eating a sandwich, and then I heard this voice. And I turned around and looked. And first I saw a whirl of smoke come up. And a man who looked straight at the camera and paused and waited for everyone to look at him and to acknowledge his presence. And then he began to speak. And I said, oh, good gracious, I'm glad I came home. I had never heard him speak because he was new on the scene. They were hearing about him in New York, in Harlem. But he was just beginning to break out. His picture was on the cover of Time magazine. And I listened to James Baldwin speak, and I said, oh, that's a voice with intelligence. Someone who also has a vision. And it was right in the moment of the civil rights era where we needed voices. We needed King, but we needed other voices. And if you read Baldwin, he delivers. Now, I could stay in that moment, but let me fast forward. I was at a major conference Right now, I can't think of where it was, but it was a huge conference of about 20,000 people. And at these conferences, they have large book exhibits. And at the book exhibits, Rutledge, I asked them, what senior scholar do you have who's an African American? You know, W.B. Du Bois, you've heard the name. And they had at least 3 of my books. Rutledge has at least 3 of my books. But I said, what senior scholar? Because we stand on the shoulder of those who have gone before us. Oh yeah, you can clap. Those are the shoulders we stand on. And I know I'm standing on other people's shoulders. So I didn't hear that comment that well. I mean, you can say it again, but just be clear, that's all. All right, so there was no Du Bois. So I asked them, and they looked and they said, they wanted kind of the latest thing in education, because I'm also in the School of Education. And I went to at least 30 exhibits looking for Du Bois and other people, folks of color, even if I expand that. And their books were not there. So I went out to lunch with my publisher, the woman from Clarkston, Anna Clarkston, who was from London, who runs Rutledge. And I said, Anna, you have all the present day people, but where are the people who brought us up to the present day? And she looked at me. And instead of dodging the question, she said, Carl, what do you want to do about it? I said, what do you mean, what do I want to do about it? That you run this company. Long story short, it wound up into this book on Du Bois. All right? Now, back to Jimmy. And I called him Jimmy. I teach at University of Wisconsin-Madison in the School of Education. Increasingly, the population of teacher candidates over there are white, and most of my colleagues and faculty members are also white. But our schools are becoming brown, black, Hmong, and you need people who understand the students in the schools. Jimmy Baldwin in '63 did an article called A Talk to Teachers that we still use today. So I became inspired to write a book called James Baldwin and the American Schoolhouse. And the emphasis behind that was, how do I help the teacher candidates here understand every child they encounter in the classroom. Not as a visitor, but like they belong. And like they have a future. That's what led to this. Lorraine, and then I know my time is just about up.
Can you talk briefly about the Obama book and how that came
Well, okay. For you, Dina. Lorraine Hansberry. What led to that is this is a book about an African American family. And to this day, and I have no problem in saying it, a group of people that is least understood within education is the African American family. Yeah, you give me an amen for that. When that black mother walks into the school, into the principal's, into the office, how is she greeted? And I could keep going. And I wanted to write something in such a way that says, my family is really just like your family. It's complex, it's complicated. The different people within the family are struggling, but they are struggling to make it. That's this book. All right, then I'm gonna shut up. Hand me the moment.
The what? Oh, the one, yeah.
If you go back, not that many years ago, when Obama was running for president, and on the news, I mean all the time, it was hard to watch, and they were saying, they were pitting these two gentlemen together who were from Trinity Church, and they would be talking about that church. And I would sit there and look at television and said, why don't they get on with it? Let's talk about the real thing. How we're going to put bread and butter on the table. How we're going to make people happy. How we are going to really exercise liberty and justice for all, not just for some people. And I was there one night just looking. And I said, why don't I write about this? Now, the catch to that, my brother, Shelby Grant, whom I'll talk to tonight, and I talked to him last night, we talked just about every night, was one of the founding members of Trinity Church. So I got this idea, and I think the next day I called Shelby. I said, hey, Shelby. I said, do you have enough juice at your church? Notice my word. You know what I mean by juice. Connections, power. For me to be able to come there and interview the parishioners. He said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to know how they feel about what's going on. And he said, I think so. Let me speak to the pastor. And he did. I think that next day, the very next day, I was off and running. I went up and interviewed about 92 people. And what I wanted to know with that tension, what did they think about what was going on? And what did they think about Obama? What did they think about Reverend Wright? And I called it a moment because in part it was just a moment in time. All right, folks, give me a big hand to welcome him to come on up, then we'll deal with questions.
Dr. Harris to the podium.
Give him a big hand now. Now here comes the dessert. Out was the meal. Here comes the dessert. and you love the dessert.
We love the meal.
Oh. I had some collard greens last night. Who knows how to fix collards?
I do.
No, you think you know how to fix collards.
I'm not gonna fix you any, but
No, I can cook some collards.
go you. Go.
Oh, I can cook. Dina can tell you that. Yeah. No fooling. You guys think you can cook. You say, my mother taught me how to do this. But your mother didn't know how to cook. Oh, yeah, I'm getting down. All right.
Okay.
All right, okay.
Well, thank you. I want to thank you, Janice Hughes, for inviting me. And when she said, I'm going to team you up with she said Carl Grant. I said, I don't know a Carl Grant. I know a Dr. Carl Grant. This man here is one of the renowned educators in the country in education. Not black. I'm talking about just a black. He is a tremendous person in education. And when I was getting my doctorate degree, a friend of mine, his name was Kwame Salter, he said, Harris, you know Kwame, he said, Harris, you're going into a rough department. I was in curriculum and instruction. And he said, there's a man over there by the name of Carl Grant, Dr. Carl Grant. And what you better do is tell your committee, those three white guys, the committee members, educators, I said, because they gave me a hard time the first session. I said, listen, because Kwame said, Richard, just tell them not to F with you because you know Dr. Carl Grant. So I said that. And I mean, they opened up the gates. And I finally got my doctorate degree thanks to Dr. Carl Grant. He was, and he's still, now I'm 88. And I knew I looked 98. But, yeah. But anyway, Dr. Grant is older than I am, and he's still working for the University of Wisconsin School of Education in curriculum and instruction, doing a tremendous job. So when she said that, I said I would love to come. I only wrote two things. One was my dissertation, which just about killed me, because, Carl, do they still do that statistical analysis and variance and all? I had to go to, anyway, it's a long story, but I finally got through that degree. And the other is a book called Growing Up Black in South Madison. And I really like this book. Now, you don't have to clap for me until it's all over. But I wrote this book in 2012 because my late wife, Maxine, and my late pastor, Reverend Richard Jones, we were talking, because my family used to ask me, Uncle Rich, what was South Madison like when you were growing up? And my daughter, Tricia over here, will tell you, I finally said, and I have two kinds of family members. Some I can't stand, and some I like. You know, the ones I can't stand, you know, the Uncle Rich, you got any Heinies? And I finally figured out that Heinies is a beer. I didn't know what they were talking about. But they were the most vociferous supporters of my book after I wrote it. So I wrote the book called Growing Up Black in South Madison. And when I wrote the book 10 years ago, in 2012, I had a lady come up to me, I spoke out at Monona Grove, and she said, you know, Dr. Harris, I really liked your book. It was so entertaining. I said, well, it wasn't meant to be entertaining. I spoke about gentrification, racism, and discrimination. And believe me, there's nothing entertaining about that. So I took her over to the corner. I grabbed her by her shoulder, took her over to the corner, and I had a copy of my book. And I said, I want to read my introduction to you. So I said, here it is. Unlike a number of stories by black authors, my story does not describe life in a large city, urban ghetto, or from the sweltering heat of the deep segregated South, but instead from a medium-sized northern city called Madison, Wisconsin. It's a city which its inhabitants were considered sophisticated, enlightened, well-educated, liberal, and fair-minded. It's a city which prides itself in being fair, regardless of race, etc. I do not describe my upbringing as being filled with these adjectives. Instead, I describe a city where some white inhabitants have treated their black brothers and sisters in a discriminatory and most racist fashion. I feel that most whites that I knew or had contact with fair-minded people, but others were some whites that I personally knew or had heard about who were brutally racist, and it just made me so mad. So anyway, my book describes how I was raised in South Madison. I was born in 1937, and so I'm 88. Now there is one person in the room who is older than me. I'm not going to point her out to you, but she and I went to Central High School together. In fact, she's in this book, because I had a picture of her with when I went dancing, what do you call it, prom, yeah. But I was born in 1937. In 1934, my mother and dad, they couldn't get a loan here in Madison, so they went to Chicago on Dearborn Street, down in the Loop. And the name of the agency that they got their grant from was the Homeowners Loan Corporation. They couldn't get a loan here in Madison, so they had to go to Chicago to get a loan that was in 1934, 3 years before I was born. I have asthma, so excuse me. But at any rate, 3 years later, I was born and raised and I don't remember much about the first 4 or 5 years of my life. But about 1940 or 41, I was told that in my area we had no hot and cold running water in the house. This is South Madison. No curbs or gutters, no sidewalks, no electrical heating, no electrical lights. The houses were, we had no running water, so we had to go out and pump. At least they did, I didn't. And then they put a big tub on the stove and make a fire, and that's how they got bathed, that type of thing. And I said, you guys did all that? I said, I was glad I was born last, because they had to do that. In 1941, the city annexed Madison, and they had all the the lights and everything. So I remember mostly the good part of that. But we used to have wells, get the water from the wells, outdoor toilets. But the reason that my family could only buy out in South Madison was because of a program that they had called redlining. And my mother and dad didn't know that. They didn't mention, my mother and dad wanted to buy a house or some property off of Seminole Highway in an area going towards Nakoma. And they said, There's only 3 areas that you can live in Madison. One was where Betty was raised. It's the Near East Side on Dayton Street. And I forgot about Dayton Street. An area called the Bush Triangle on Regent Street, West Washington Avenue and Park Street, and South Madison. So they chose South Madison. And my dad never explained this redlining thing to me until I was about 12 or 13. And he said we had to buy out here because white people did not want us to live in any other area in Madison. And I discovered that redlining is still existing today in this city. I've talked to bankers and they say, you know, under this, well, you know, Dr. Harris, we are still redlining, and it's not legal, of course, but they're doing it. So my book, it's basically, and I'll try to run through it quick, it's 3 sections that I really like to talk about. And the first was a section where I learned about living in, I went to school at Central High School, and I was not that popular in school, but I got through it. And I tried to chase every, I mean, the black girls in Madison, they were so attractive. I mean, there was, from a scale of 1 to 10, they were all 10s, but none of them liked me. Except one, and so that helped me through. But when I went to Central, my mother sat me down. She said, "Now, Richard, I want to tell you something. I don't like that school because those girls look too fast up there. But no dating of white girls." I said, "What does that mean?" She says, "Well, what it means is," and my dad was sitting right there. He was no help. Whenever things got tied, and my dad would just kind of scoot, but I was asking him for some support. He just sat there and listened. No white dating.
Is this in your book?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Matter of fact, yes, it is. And I said, "Well, what if I do?" She said, "You know what, Richard? I brought you into this world. I'll take you out." So I heard that. I knew that. So my dad says, "Well, you know, Richard, that means you're going to die." So I said, "Well, I got that part, so I'm not that stupid." But the reason that she did that was because she came from Americus, Georgia. And they used to lynch black men for looking at a white woman. So I said, "Well, they won't do that up here." She said, "I don't know. I'm not going to take a chance." So I got through. I was voted the most bashful boy at Central High. And you know, so I was a football player and did basketball. And sometimes these cheerleaders would say, "Richard, we're going to go down to Bancroft Dairy and we're going to honor this athletes. Do you want to come?" I wanted to go so bad. But I remember my mother saying, you know, "I'll take you out of here." So I passed on the ice cream. But racism was really introduced to me when my mother was a part of a group and her mother was part of the group, and Kwame Salter's grandmother and Mr. Joe Gothard, his grandmother, they were involved with the group. There's a bunch of women, and we didn't know what we just call them mothers who were watching over us. So we just said Mother's Watch. And the first time when I was at Franklin School, I was eating some cobbler pie. My mother always, it was on a Monday after Sunday. She said, she was talking to somebody, and she said, "Richard, baby, listen, when you go to school, do you have names of birds?" I said, "Yeah, I'm in the Wrens, and some other kids are in the Robins." Well, we found out that the kids in our neighborhood at Franklin School were segregated, and they were called the Robins and Wrens and blackbirds and that type of thing. So they told Reverend Washington, and I love Reverend Washington. He was a good minister, but sometimes he swore. And he went over there and he told that principal, and my cousin Charles Hargrove, he was in on everything. My mother would not let me hear these things, but Charles said, Reverend Washington said, "I want this," you know, the principal, he said, "You should be ashamed of yourself. I want this MF stuff to stop now." So my mother said that night, she said, "Richard, when you go to school tomorrow, you're not going to be with the birds, you're going to be with everybody else." I said, "Okay, well, I didn't know that much." But the other part was where the where the Overture Center is right now, there was a store called, I think it was called Manchester's. And they had a big sign saying colored women cannot try on clothes. It was called By Sight Unseen or something like that. Well, man, they told Reverend, I don't know the year, but it was about, I'm going to say about 1950. And so they invited Reverend Washington. These women got a hold of Reverend Washington, and he met with the people over at Manchester's or something. And he said, I'll tell you this, if this policy doesn't change, we're going to come in here and burn this. Now, Reverend Washington was a good man, bless his heart. He's dead, but he sometimes he used profanity. He said, we will tear this MF store down. And you know, they changed that. And not only that, they began to hire black women as clerks. So they got a twofer. They stopped, women could try on clothes, because they said white women did not want to try on clothes that colored women. How would they know, you know, if they had, whoever had it anyway? But, so that was the second thing. I wrote that about my Mother's Watch group. The other two groups, the other two things that I'll talk very quickly about. And the first one was, we talked about race discrimination. And I was really introduced to that when I was talking to Mrs. Helen McLean. Well, Mrs. Helen McLean, bless her heart, and I think she's still living up in the Twin Cities, but she applied for a job at the Madison Metropolitan School District. And so the secretary said, are you colored? She said, well, I'm a Negro. So she told the superintendent, I got a colored person out here. So he talked to her. He says, what do you want? She says, I want a job here. And he said, this woman must be crazy. So he went and asked for the school psychiatrist to come down and talk to her to see if she was sane, not to see if she could teach. And so she didn't get the job. She had to go to Beloit, and 3 years later she was hired here in Madison. And so I recall that. The biggest thing of discrimination that I can recall was in 1950, 75 years ago. I can remember when Reverend Washington was preaching and the people were telling him that the city started a program called Urban Renewal. And what a bunch of bunk that was. This was in the bush, and it was Urban Renewal with the department called Madison Redevelopment Authority. And the Redevelopment Authority approached a lot of black owners, Jewish owners, Italian families with this program called Urban Renewal. And so they said, you know, we're going to just come in and kind of tinker around the neighborhood and do some things here and there, and you can move back into your homes or blah, blah, blah. And they lied to those people. I wrote in my book, especially, there's a lady named Gus Wiley and Mary Wiley. Gus Wiley was drafted into the Army, but he switched over to the Air Force in 1941. He got discharged in 1946. And he and his wife, Mary, bought a two-flat on Mound Street, two-flat apartment. And they paid that bad boy off in about 2 or 3 years. So it had been assessed at around $21,000 or $22,000. The MRA came in there with a relocation worker, and they offered them $14,000, $8,000 less than it was assessed at. And of course they argued, and they said no and no. And I mean, the stress was so much on Mr. Wiley, he had a stroke. Mrs. Wiley, I think, moved to just south of Chicago, Blue Island or somewhere down that way. I don't know whatever happened to their property, but that was just, and black people who were living in apartments, the owners, apartment owners, didn't inform people that their apartments were going to be torn down and they'd have to move out. And so there were situations where people were actually, they extended it for about a month. Now the MRA had 7 relocation workers, and they were supposed to work with these 125 families. In fact, I dedicate my book to those 125 families from the Bush who were cheated out of their property. They were supposed to help them, and they never did. And people had to move out to South Madison, fortunately, to live with relatives. Back in those days, they had television sets were as long as that table, but the screen was this big. And then we had to put washers and dryers in the back. That's how they moved, because there was no rental moving people that took care of that for black people. And when I wrote that in my book, it was so traumatic. I was just crying. When I would talk to my Italian friends, George Coletti and Louis Cassini, and they said, "Richard, we're going through hell." I said, I didn't know that, man. He said, "Yeah, we got to move." And then Albert Smith and a number of other black people, the same thing. So when I think of urban renewal, how those people were cheated, I was very upset. The last thing that I want to talk about is, it's so ironic, because in 1977, the Board of Education for the Madison Public Schools decided to close 2 schools in South Madison. One was Franklin, and one was Lincoln. And in the 1980s, I was minding my own business, watching a football game between the Green Bay Packers and the Baltimore Colts. And I've been waiting for this game all year. The Colts had Johnny Unitas and Lenny Moore and Big Daddy Lipscomb, and the Packers had Bart Starr and Willie Wood and all these. And I'm watching that game when this woman called me. My wife Maxine said, "Richard, there's a lady that's been calling you." I said, "About what?" She said, "About school closings." I said, "Well, yeah, they close in June." I'm thinking she's talking about for the summer. And she said, "No, it's a little more serious than that." Well, I said, tell her I had an appendicitis attack or something. I'm watching this game. Well, Reverend Dawson called me, and he said, "Richard, I've asked a woman to call you and talk to you about what's going on in the public schools, because they're going to close the schools." And he said, "Richard, it's going to be just like West Washington Avenue in the Triangle, except they're using the schools. Because once you close the schools, they move out." I said, "Get out of here." That's, to the pastor. Reverend, after that. But anyway, he was right, and she was right. So in 1978, we initiated a race discrimination complaint against the Board of Education and the Madison Metropolitan School District. There were 7 members on that board. One of them was black, and his name was Kwame Salter. And I mean to tell you, Kwame Salter, he was a fighter. And we found out later that his one vote was worth more than all the other Board of Education. So if you're just the only black, don't feel bad, because that Kwame proved, and he's still living, bless his heart. And I think he writes for Hughes magazine. But at any rate, in 1981, 3 years later, we finally got a hearing and a reading from the Office of Civil Rights. At that time, it was part of the Justice Department. And a guy named Ivory Mitchell, I never forget this. I was working at MATC then, and it was a rainy, cold, windy day. And he said, "Harris, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm talking to you, He said, "Sit down." I said, "Oh, Lord." I said, "You got a decision?" He said, "Yeah." So he said, "You guys won." I said, "Ah." He said, I just got off the phone with Dr. Ritchie and told him, and they're going to take that off the table so those schools will stand, Lincoln and Franklin. And I think about that because I used to go to Franklin. And so we won that case. But the thing that struck me was in their 3-year investigation, Mr. Mitchell called me. He said, you know, Harris, I got to tell you something. How do you live in that city? He said, you know, we've had race discrimination complaints that we've looked in at San Jose, California, Pasadena, California, Columbus, Ohio, Jackson, Mississippi. I don't think I've ever had any situation where I've seen some of the most vicious, racist white people based on the comments that we got. When we conducted our investigation, and these people didn't know whether we were black or white, but we talked to, these were white businesses, owners, bankers. They wanted to get the feeling of the community. And he said, I heard he said, one guy told me, I don't like colored people. If I had my way, I'd move them all up to Token Creek. I'd never heard of Token Creek. He said it's north of some prairie or somewhere. He said we should move all the colored people up to Token Creek. He said, it's a beautiful city. What is it, 2 lakes? I said, well, no, it's 4. He said, well, it's a beautiful city, but the racism. And so when I wrote my book, when I was interviewed at Channel 3, I was talking to Dr. Alex G. about this, and I don't know how many times people would call in and say, that Dr. Harris is lying. There was never no discrimination here. We never had the Ku Klux Klan, and oh boy. So I just want to close with this, in that racism is still alive in Madison, Wisconsin. It is. And thanks to people like Dr. Carl Grant, who fought racism. I mean, if you look at it this way, he was at the University of Wisconsin when he was probably the first, and I never saw any black people up there except Carl Grant. He was a kind of a feisty looking something now, but he was kind of. But I liked him. I met him a couple of times, but I really liked his stance at the university. And like I say, I'm 88. And I'm saying that Carl has got to be. I asked him how old he was. He said he's like Jack Benny. He said, I'm 39. But if I'm 88, he's older than me by about 6 or 7 years, I'm sure. But doesn't he look good? Yes. I said, man. And his mind is sharp, and he is still working at one of the most renowned educational schools in the country in curriculum and instruction. So my hat's off to Dr. Grant. One final thing, our book is, the book, I wrote it in 2012 because of those knucklehead nephews asking what was South Madison like. And for the first 8 or 10 years, my family were the only people who bought the book. We got a big family here in Madison. And then one day I got a call from a guy's name is, can't think of his name now, at Memorial. He said, Dr. Harris, we're using your book at our school. I said, get out of here. He said, yeah, are they using it over West too? I said, no. He said, yeah. So he said, why don't you talk to the curriculum coordinator? And she called me, and we set up a time where we could get the book into the regular curriculum, I said, well, what do you do with it? He said, well, we have a U.S. African American history program. This will be supplementary to it. We're not going to replace our history book, but it'll be, and I'm thinking, well, thank you so much, and so they did that. We're also at Beloit. We're starting with Beloit High School. Dr. Can't think of his name now. As I get older, my mind just, I'll think of it about 3 o'clock tomorrow morning. But anyway, the superintendent They're going to use their book. They're starting this fall, and also at Edgewood High School. So we have 3 books. I'm working with Dr. Carolyn Stanford, and she wants to contact the people at Milwaukee. So we're extremely happy that the book is in at least 3 systems. And I'm just so happy that we were able to, and I'm still alive to explain this to all of my family, the good side and the bad side. So that's it. My kids are saying, these are my families over here telling me to close it up. So thank you so much. Thank you for the chance.
Well, I tell you what, I don't think we had enough time to hear all this wonderful stuff, right? God, shame on me. I should have had more hours for that. But now we're going to open it up for questions and answers. And Jill is out there somewhere? Right here. Okay. And she has a mic. Wave her down. She'll come to you, and you have the mic and answer your questions. Is there anything you want to say?
I'm former Dane County Board Supervisor Regina Ryan, serving from '94 to 2002. My question to you two, because you did say that we still have racism, not only in the city of Madison, but the cities of Verona, Middleton, Sunbury, all around.
Dane County. There you go, Dane County. Dane County.
Since leaving the county board in 2002, I have probably had 10 discrimination cases between the city of Madison. There it goes. And if you're in the Verona School District, then you have to go to the state, which is where I am right now. Now they want to mediate. That's a good thing. To you two, how can we get the NAACP around here to be like the NAACP? Excuse me, I'll be quick. And I just noticed this morning that they put the ballots in last night for the new leadership, so we missed that. But we don't have enough discrimination attorneys. Whether the city gives you a list of attorneys that would help you with your cases, they're not going to help me, because when I was on the county board, they saw how I worked and I was difficult. And I couldn't get jobs around here from black people. But I didn't come here to talk about me. We need to please help us, because you guys have the people at the top. You have the knowledge. You got the PhD. Okay, how can we strengthen our representation? If you look at the case numbers right now for the city and the state, after you get the year 2025, it goes 0, 0, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 2,345 cases already, and we're only halfway through this year. It still exists. It's more blatant because of what's happening in Washington, and they think they can talk to us. And finally, I appreciate you. You helped me get through Madison College. I was the first black female to graduate from police science. I was the first black female Dane County deputy sheriff. I was the second black female on the Dane County board. But after I got through with politics, I couldn't get a job around here. And I'm still working because Social Security is not enough money. And now I'll end. I have an open case right now with Verona because they just fired me after almost 10 years, the longest serving black teacher out there. And you just deal with this constantly, constantly, constantly. But we don't give up, and I'm not going back to the 60s.
You want to respond?
Good question.
I don't, can either of you have any responses, or?
Well, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Did you want an answer? Did you want an answer? So what can we? I don't know what we're gonna do. I'll tell you one thing. I was talking to my sister because she says, you know, Richard, I don't even watch TV because it's so bad. And I told her, I said, Georgia, we have a situation where you've got a racist president. I don't know what he's going to do with the 14th Amendment. I told Georgia we may have to go back. I don't know, because they're starting to tinker with that. I'll tell you what, when I was growing up, we had a deacon old man. His hair was whiter than mine, and we used to just laugh at him. His name was Deacon Morton or Mormon, I forgot his name. But he said, don't give up. So I want to read to you my favorite scripture that I told Georgia. From Isaiah 40:31. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. All I can say is stay in the hands of the Lord and just keep praying.
Other questions?
Sure. Thank you both for speaking. I appreciate it. So, you know, one of the things you spoke to when you talked about the Triangle neighborhood, and I listened to you on Dr. G's podcast, Tell the Same Story, was just the idea of how policy shapes people's lived experiences, right? There's like the blatant racism that comes from individuals, but then there's like people that make decisions that affect people. And just even thinking about the neighborhood that I live in Belmar, which includes the Allied neighborhood, and just the history of you know, the Madison area moving people around to different places, whether it be to Simpson Street or to the South Side or to Allied Drive or now to Raymond Road or Gammon Road or you know, Darbo Worthington. It just speaks to the fact that oftentimes policy really leaves people out, and oftentimes people making those policy decisions change it, where if you look at a map of, you know, Allied neighborhood, there's this like rectangular, almost like a finger, that's the city of Madison, and then everything surrounding it is Fitchburg, and how kids, depending on where they live, are going to be in a different school district. You know, when law enforcement needs to be called for something, a different department will get called, and people are even eligible for different programs. So I just wanted to show you appreciation for writing your book, for telling your story and putting an actual human story behind some of the things that affect so many people, and that these types of things cross my mind when I'm sitting in this chair to make decisions. So always make sure to do the right thing and to not overlook who's not at the table, because oftentimes the people that make those decisions, you know, they don't look like you, they don't look like me.
Now, are you an alderman?
I am, yes, sir.
I'm glad you mentioned that, and I like what you were just saying. Now, Betty Banks and Betty is head of Stony the Road. You know, Stony the Road is one of the most rambunctious, active agencies, groups that I like that are dealing with black history. Nino Amato, who's Italian, Betty and myself, so you're going to get a copy of our, I'm glad you mentioned that. So you can put your money, put your mouth, what is it, what do you say, put your mouth is, yeah. We're going to be sending a letter to, the, what do you call it, the mayor. Right, Betty? Of Madison. We're going to be sending a letter to her and the alderman. What's your name again? Write that down, Betty. So
I'm an alderman in Fitchburg, though.
Oh, okay. Anyway, well, we're going to send a letter to the mayor, and we're going to ask the mayor and the city of Madison to give compensation back to the family relatives of those 150 or 175 blacks who are dead now and dead, gone to glory out there in the cemetery. Get at least compensation for those people. Right, Betty? And so, any other aldermen here? Okay. So we'll count on, we'll ask for your support, because the first time we did it, we got nowhere. So we're trying it again, and it's something we think that there should be compensation for the way those people were lied to. Now, their families should get some kind of, half of them didn't get anything. So we will be sending a letter, and you'll see it, and Betty will be running with it, and she's the driving force behind the group. I'm just like the little water carrier behind her. But we'll be dealing with that, and I'm so happy that you mentioned that at least you're an alderman. We'll send you a copy. But it will go to the mayor, asking the city council to give compensation to every black family who got cheated out of their property in the triangle.
Rose has a comment.
Okay, so it's kind of, I just want to give acclimates to Dr. Harris, because I know him, and I worked for him at Madison College, MATC. He also spearheaded the disability services for education for people with challenges. And he was, not only does he work for black people, he works for all people and people that don't have access to education. And he's done a wonderful job. He hired me, thank you. I call him Pops. And my deacon at my church, Mount Zion. But thank you for that, because I'm disabled. I'm considered totally disabled. And thank you for that.
Thank you, Rose. Other comments, questions? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Anika Harris. I'm Dr. Richard Harris's granddaughter. And I just want to say thank you for speaking, Dr. Grant. And thanks, Granddad. I have a question because I think it's in your book, but when you said that, Dr. Harris, when you said that the families got kicked out of the, you said it was the triangle? Okay. And then you touched base a little bit on where they went, like where they got lied to about, like, oh, don't worry, we're gonna redo this area for you as black families, and that obviously didn't happen. And then you said that there was families that they could live with. What about the other people?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know what happened. I don't know.
So maybe it's more of just a comment that I just wanted to say
Okay,
out
well,
loud.
thank you. We've asked that. What happened to those people? I have the names in this book, and people will call me, and I'll say, talk to the city. Well, would you believe when we call the city, they'll say, you know, we lost those records. Now, how are you going to lose official records for something this serious? So we have to go down to the State's Historical Society. They have some. But the lies, I talked to the former mayor, Paul Soglin, bless his heart. Paul said, you guys are on the right track. Find out what happened to that information. So in answer to your question, I don't know what happened to them, but we intend to at least, if we have to go, of course the problem is the politics in Washington are not good, so if we go to the Justice Department, you know, they may just throw our complaint into the river, but we're still, we'll still end up going to the Justice Department, probably.
I just have a question for Carl. How do you think the focus on the relationship between Reverend Jeremiah Wright and President Obama, how do you think that affected him and what transpired in years to come? That's number one. And secondly, do you know what their relationship is like after that?
Not that I can say with certainty, but through observation, talking to my brother, seeing Jeremiah Wright a few times in other spaces, it was never like it was. And I would say, I wonder how the healing process is working, because that a healing process would have been great for everyone, including the church. You know, and based on everything that I heard, but even talking to my brother recently, that Reverend Wright would come back over to the church and do sermons. I don't know if Obama has been back into the church since he left. So it's one of those things that you wish that would come to a fruitful and a happy conclusion.
I have a question for Dr. Grant. The University of Wisconsin is known to be able to recruit the best and the brightest, and obviously you're one of them. But they do not retain them. What has sustained you over the years that you have stayed at this university that is known to mistreat black people?
For 75 years, right? You've been here 75 years?
Let me say this. I have been to universities throughout this country and throughout the world. My colleagues in CNI and in the School of Education and across that I meet across the campus, they're good people, but they're also, that does not mean that Madison does not, and by Madison I mean the university plus the need change. And many of the people that I meet and talk to are interested in that change. But the extent at which that change takes place is too slow. You know, what keeps me here, I mean, it hasn't been silky smooth. No one is saying that. There have been bumps on the road, but in some way, I took those, because anywhere I would go, especially given my area of work, I would have run into very much something somewhat similar. So in many ways, they came challenges that I said I would not allow them to stand in my way. And to try to reach out and work with graduate students who wanted to go on to take that idea on. It's not an easy question to answer.
Well, I think that you have a testimony to your wanting to stay so that you can make a difference. You know, for somebody to stay for as long as you have, and we all know that you've had those challenges. So I just want to thank you for that, because you are an example of somebody who probably has had, you know, many a stony the road. Yeah. You know.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Harris, you don't know me personally, but you should know. I have mentioned your name to many students. I have either mentored their first year, students of color, I mentored their first year at UW-Madison, because somebody told somebody, I lived there and I was from Chicago. When I first started teaching here in '92, I was at Sherman Middle School, and I wanted to learn about the city, and I thought that'd be really great for the kids to learn too. One of the books was your book about Madison Southside. I learned so much about Madison, but the other thing was, as my kids took the book home to their parents were learning about Madison. And some of their grandparents were reminded of things that had happened in Madison. So not only have you had an impact for generations before you, you have already impacted generations ahead of you. Oh. And I was told, as we go up, we pull them from behind ahead of us. And I truly believe in the work you have done that. So I want to say, as a person who's never seen you, but whose life you have impacted in the 31 years I taught, thank you for the work you have done for the city of Madison.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Other comments, questions? Oh,
I'm Barbara. I came here 2 years ago to Fitchburg. I'm originally from Eau Claire, Wisconsin. I want to thank you both for what you gave to us today and presented. I'm going to go out and buy your books. My question is about writing. I'm trying to become a writer myself. I have something I need to tell, a story that's very important to this whole country. And I want to know, how do I go about getting a publisher? If you have any feedback on that.
It depends on the nature of what you're writing. If you write it, every publishers that I've run into have their own particular niche. And this is what you have to work for, look at. Once you have, let's say, a draft or a proposal, then think about where you want to send it. And if once you have a draft or a proposal, I will even be willing to look at it and give you offer and advice on where you possibly could send it.
yeah. All right, so we're just about ready to wrap it up. Is there? Oh, yeah. There you go. Great.
So, Dr. Harris, I have a question. When you mentioned the bush, and I didn't live in the bush. I came when the South Side was created. So, but I grew up with friends that came from the bush. Other than black, there were Italians, some Germans. South Madison was diverse like that when I grew up. So when someone mentioned other people, so like the Italians, they were heavy in the bush area. So what happened to them? Like, did they get lied to or not?
Yes, they did.
And also, from my experience, they never redeveloped that area until now.
Yeah.
So that's like 30 years or more.
Right.
So it's an obvious lie, because the reason you had to move was redevelopment. Never got redeveloped till now.
No, it did.
It did? Oh, Bayview was.
Buildings they're tearing down now, that was 69, 70.
Right, but I thought it moved, it was further up too, where the railroad tracks were, not just that triangle. So maybe my geography is wrong. It was more than just that triangle of where the senior citizen building is, and where they just developed Bayview. Right, but it was also up further on West Wash, right, where the students that have the block party and stuff, all those houses were, from my understanding, I had friends who there was Italians also that lived in that area too, not just the triangle. So I don't know if only the blacks lived in the triangle and the Italians lived, or
No,
they were all together from my understanding.
The Italian families, and when I would talk to Italian families, you know, they were white, but they were still being discriminated against because of their name. Some of them had to change their last name from Simonetti to Simmons.
Yeah.
So they really caught it. And when I went to school at Central. But I just want to say one thing, and I just can't thank this man here, because I really don't think I could have gotten through the program if he hadn't been here. And when I think about it, he was the only that I knew black educator, right? When I was going to school, seemed like it was 1800s, but anyway, he was the person that did a lot, and he's still fighting the battle. I'm sure Dr. Grant, he wants me to call him Carl, but I'm gonna call him Dr. Grant, because to me, he deserves that. But Dr. Grant fights us, and he's still hanging in there, and I know he is doing a tremendous, so I just wanna say, just give him another round of applause.
Well, okay, did I say we had a lot of power in this house today? Unbelievable, unbelievable. Should we invite them back? Yeah, okay, I absolutely agree. Look, I really want to thank both of you for what you shared with us today. Your time, your experiences, your knowledge is what have we as a collective group here that aren't together all the time appreciate you from the bottom of our hearts. That I really, really appreciate you taking the time to come here. And for those of you that this is your first time here at the center, we hope that you come back again and again and again. We offer some really good lunch and learn programs and other programs throughout the center here. And we're always open, and you're always welcome to come here. So I'd like for you to give one more round of applause to these two gentlemen. Thank you, thank you, thank you.